Good afternoon, Fighting Scots. My name is Jordan Sherpy-Lencioni, and I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Engagement here at Monmouth College. I want to welcome everybody to our next Golden Scots event, a tour of the Hughes Library Archives with our campus archivist Lynn and college historian Jeff Rankin. We're so thrilled that everyone is able to join us this afternoon. Before we begin, just to cover a few housekeeping items, today's event is going to be recorded and will be posted on the Monmouth College website later next week. For the best viewing experience, make sure you are on speaker mode. You can find that located in the right-hand corner at the top of your screen. Attendees will be able to ask questions and interact throughout the chat. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll enable it so that you can turn on your video and sound so that if you've got any questions that you'd like to ask Lynn and Jeff live, you're more than welcome to do so at that time. At the end of today's event, you'll also see a short 3-minute survey appear in your web browser. And then next week, you'll receive a more comprehensive survey in your email as well. A little bit about our presenters today. Lynn has been the Technical Services Librarian at Monmouth College since 1997. She is responsible for cataloging, system administration, and collection management. Since 2010, Archivist has been included in Lynn's duties. In addition to arranging and caring for the collection, Lynn also teaches a series of archives management courses through the History Department. Lynn has a Bachelor of Arts in History and Art History and a Master's of Library and Information Science, both from the University of Iowa. Since 1992, Jeff Rankin has been a chronicler at Monmouth College's Colorful History, and in 2003 edited the sesquicentennial history of the college. Currently holding the title of editor and historian, he oversees production of the college's publications while also working to preserve the college's legacy. A native of Monmouth, Jeff is the son to the late longtime Director of Admissions and Alumni Relations, Glenn Rankin, class of 1943. His twin brother, Doug, class of 1979, is a professor of theater, while his wife, Terry, class of 2000, recently retired as the Director of Alumni and Development Records. In addition to his duties at the college, Jeff writes a weekly local history column for the Monmouth newspaper. Jeff, Lynn, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Jordan. We're very excited to be here, and I'll just lead things off. We're sitting here on the second floor of Hughes Library. Any of you that were here before the 2000s, there wasn't much up here. When they originally built the building, they did not have the funds to finish it, but they had the foresight to build a second story to house an eventual collection, and they've done that. It's a beautiful addition. We are sitting in the special collections room. I don't know if we call it anything other than that.
Got a lot of special stuff in it.
Yeah, but we have some rare books and various things. Our actual archives room is just next door, but this room is used quite a bit for seminars and meetings and that sort of thing as well. But we brought in a few items that I asked Lynn to pull out of the archives, and just sort of a mixed group of items that sort of represent the history of the college, but also show the diversity of the things that Lynn has to deal with in both archiving and preserving and cataloging. And so I think it will give a sense of what goes on somewhat in the archives. So Lynn, do you have anything you wanted to say to start, or we'll just get started?
Yeah, just that it's kind of a mixed bag. It's a hodgepodge, but that's what archives are, and that's the fun part about it. So,
okay, well,
where would you like to start?
Let's start with how about a piece of textile?
Okay.
That is I think one of Lynn's specialties. She's done a lot of work in learning how to preserve and restore textiles.
Kind of big, so I hope we can get it out here. And once we do, you can probably figure out which collection it belongs to. This is pretty safe. Oh, here we go.
Okay. And tomorrow I'm going to be doing a presentation about Monmouth College during World War II, and this dates to that period in our history. it's the flag for the Naval Flight Preparatory School, which was held at Monmouth College between about 1942 and 1945. And during the war, when all of the young men basically were away, the college brought in the Naval School for cadets to get their pre-training before they became pilots. And we had probably about 3,500 cadets that came to Monmouth College, and basically stayed in the dorms and took over the college. I think Michael Hall was where they had their mess hall, and they had their post office in Wallace Hall. And all the women who were left on campus had to basically evacuate and go live in the fraternity houses. But anyway, this is a flag that flew over the preparatory school. And I don't know if Lynn would like to talk about some of the issues in preserving a piece of history like this.
This is pretty nice. Not faded or anything like that. That's always a big concern. Keeping it in the dark and so forth. But then one of the problems with keeping things in the dark is other things like to stay in the dark. And with this particular piece, and we have another flag also from the school, one of the problems is insects. So we always have to be concerned with kind of having what they call an integrated pest management program. Basically means squashing the bugs when they show up. But we have an exterminator that helps me keep track of all that type of thing. He's a very friendly gentleman, and he always likes to come up and check and make sure my bugs are gone. So basically we're monitoring all that. I have some traps, little sticky pad traps, and it's usually not a problem. I think a few years back, we had quite an infestation, not so much up here because we're on the upper level of the library, but there were a lot of crickets around. So crickets like to eat paper and things like that. But as far as fabrics go, we're more concerned with carpet beetles. And of course, what everybody has to deal with is clothes moths. So these are have some slight little chew marks on them. But the past couple of years, we haven't had any problem with it at all, mainly because we've been keeping an eye on it. We just always have to monitor it, and that's the big thing with textiles. We have a lot of old Letterman sweaters, those types of things, and then we have to make sure, again, it depends upon the type of fabric. Is it wool? Is it cotton? Who likes to eat it? We have a beautiful silk kimono in the other room that is what it has a problem with it called silk shatters. But it's got, so you always have to pay attention to also things like what's on the fabric, beads, buttons, snaps, those types of things. This kimono has embroidered flowers all over it, so you have to pay attention to what the embroidery is made out of too. But like most of preservation work, it's just keeping an eye on everything.
Okay, well, that was interesting. Let's go to one of the things that we have a lot of in this room is books. Yeah. And we've got a really interesting, valuable book in the form of a family Bible, which has some interesting history to Monmouth College. This is the Harding Family Bible, and some of you may have heard the name Harding. Abner Harding was a Civil War general that led the 83rd Illinois Infantry, and he was from Monmouth, was breveted to become a general after the Battle of Fort Donelson. And he later became a congressman, but he was one of the wealthiest men in Monmouth. He helped bring the Burlington Railroad through Monmouth, and his family has kept close ties with the college over the years. We actually have his regimental sword in our collection and some other things. And just recently, a few years ago, the family entrusted us with their family Bible. And we had to send it back for a while because they were still updating it. But they have the births and deaths and marriages of everybody going back to, I don't know what the first date is. Do we have a,
1833-ish?
okay,
Yes. Mhm, I
Yeah.
think so. I'll try.
right.
It's a little hard. But this is the fun part. This is all the handwritten, of course, the rest of it's all published Bible, published in 1849, but this is all of the scribblings from the family. So.
Mhm. And Abner Harding also gave the land for the first Monmouth College building, which actually stood on the west side of town. And he also endowed the first professorship at Monmouth College. So he was quite a friend of the college. He wasn't a graduate himself, but he believed in education. And his widow was also good to the college in her will. So we're just feel fortunate that the family continues to have ties to the college, and we're hoping that someday we can really get all of our Harding collection sort of in one display area where it can all be seen together and appreciated.
Preservation wise, this is in really fine shape. I mean, you can tell that it was a family heirloom and they took good care of it. We did have it professionally rebound, and when they rebound it, then they added the family's notes and so forth into it. I seem to remember you had a question. We actually had to use it. Not just a few years ago. We were looking at the date.
I think we were, yes.
So
and,
that's always fun
yeah.
when you actually get to use the stuff that we've taken such good care of.
Absolutely, yeah. So that was a fun item to receive. We also received some other things at the same time. When he was a congressman, he had a photograph, portrait taken by Matthew Brady in Washington, and so we have that. It's a carte de visite, and so just a lot of interesting ties to the family.
I hope I don't make anybody dizzy, but I'm going to try to move the camera down just a bit so we can see this next item a little.
Okay. And the next item is one of my favorite types of items that we have, and I think Lynn too.
Absolutely.
And this is a student scrapbook. And in the days before annuals, but also after annuals had begun, students compiled their own scrapbooks to commemorate their college experience. And they're just fascinating because they are full of original source items, newspaper clippings, invitations for dances, just things
just
that people
about
put
anything
in scrapbooks. But one of the best thing I think is the photographs. There are often candid photographs from an earlier time, and these are one of a kind. These aren't ones that have ever been published anywhere, and so we're always, when we get a new scrapbook, that's one of the first things I look at is undiscovered photographs that might show a campus event, a building, or something that we've never seen before.
So she has her photographs. She has little invitations from different events that she was invited to, all of her sorority activities, little notes back and forth from friends, dance cards if they had a dance at a gala or so forth, all kinds of programs, things that she attended, events that she attended on campus. Here's a piano recital that she attended, and she was just an awesome scrapbooker. She had good organization, and everything is so well presented in here. This one's in relatively good shape. This, of course, would have been something she probably would have gone to like a stationery store and bought this binding, and then of course it had the pages in it, and then she was just gluing things onto the pages. But we have different scrapbooks from a lot of different students, and sometimes they use just anything and everything. So it's a big consideration to what the condition of the binding is in. We have some that were in such bad shape that we do have to take them apart. We do try sometimes to, things are falling out, and so we try to glue them back in, although we don't use glue. We use a wheat starch paste that once it gets wet, you can take it apart, take things back out too. So it's an archival type of paste. Original order is real important in a scrapbook because lots of times they are in pieces. It's always you always want to try to keep them in that original order, the way that the student, the creator made them, because that meant something to them, right? So you could go through this chronologically and pretty much map her life for the few years that she was here at Monmouth College. Luella's scrapbook. This is Luella Beveridge, and hers is kind of extra special, and it kind of speaks to the power of archives and really pulls at your heartstrings because Luella didn't make it through all 4 of her years. She passed away in her, I think late in her junior year from, I believe it was a form of meningitis. Because you're paging through here and you're getting so involved in all the fun stuff she did, and then things kind of stop. And then in the very, very end, obviously a family member, someone has inserted her obituary in the back of it. But we have a lot of different scrapbooks, and like Jeff said, they are a lot of fun. They really speak to the creator, right? And they're really good learning tools for our students when they're doing some research or when they're learning how to preserve items. Gracie Peterson, I'm sure you all probably heard of Gracie. She was a big scrapbooker. We have a lot of hers. She didn't just go to the stationery store and buy nice pre-made. She would go to like a decorating store and get an old wallpaper book, rip out the wallpaper samples, and then use the pages in the wallpaper book for all of her pictures and stuff. So awesome stuff. It was just a little bit of a challenge working with a wallpaper book, but again, you never know what you're gonna find.
Right.
So.
Okay, what do we have next?
You have actually some board of trustees.
Okay, sure.
So these are really old.
Yes. All right. Well, to me, this is one of the treasures of our archives because this goes back to the earliest days of Monmouth College. All the minutes of the trustees, it was called the Senate in those days, were written by hand. And if you are, let's see if we can find a date.
Oh my goodness. And of course, they're all written out in script, ink, which is sometimes a challenge to be able to read. This was an early one.
Yeah,
I'm not immediately finding a date here. I'm just finding
there's probably a date there.
Probably at the
yeah,
end
1857.
Okay.
So that was actually shortly after the college was formally received its charter from the state. That was even though our founding date is 1853, it was 1857 when the charter was approved. And you know, it depends on the handwriting. A lot of the early handwriting is very good. Some of it is not quite as legible, and it takes some practice to read it. But it basically chronicles all of the important things in the college's history, whether it was hiring faculty, it was setting tuition, deciding what types of courses to teach, building new buildings, everything like that is in there. You can go through chronologically and find a lot of really good information. In later years, the minutes were typed, which was kind of nice. But it's kind of interesting too, just to follow the look of the minutes from the very florid Victorian handwriting to the more modern handwriting, and then the typing. So it just kind of follows the history of the college.
The biggest preservation issue I have here is just wanting to make sure we have another copy in case anything would happen to these. So several years back, we just kind of started an ongoing project. Sometimes when I have a student who's available we've scanned them. So we have them all, I think we're almost done. And at least we have a digital copy. Now they still might need to be transcribed. Someone might need to you know, try to, we could always do that where we then type up what they actually say on, to kind of decipher the handwriting, so to speak. Handwriting is beginning to be a little bit of a problem with our younger researchers. They are not, they don't grow up with handwriting. Penmanship is not taught in the public schools anymore. So sometimes it's very challenging to them. But sometimes we share a page and we all try to figure out what it says. No, I think that's an F. No, I think it's an F. Those types of things. So.
Yeah, one of the things that I find interesting is the Library of Congress has done this crowdsourcing to transcribe a lot of early documents, whether it's Lincoln letters and that sort of thing. And anybody can go in there and volunteer to do that. And I've done some, and you know, some of it can be really difficult but you know, it's very rewarding when you are able to finally figure out what the writer was saying, because a lot of times they use shorthand and be talking about something you really didn't know anything about, and so sometimes you really have to do some research to figure out what was going on at that time, what they might have been talking about. So it's really a fun thing to do, but it can be very time consuming. So what do we have here?
Lynn and Jeff, before we continue on with the next item, we have a couple of questions in the chat. I just wanted to read you guys. Was Harding Grade School named after Abner Harding?
It was not. Harding was named after Harry Harding, who was, I believe, let's see, he wasn't, I don't think he was a brother of Abner, but he was, I believe, maybe a cousin. But there was there were Hardings and the Hardins. One part of the family had the G, and the other part dropped it. Chancey Hardin was another. He was the brother, I believe, of Harry. But they were from the same family. They just weren't directly related.
Okay. And then was Luella related to Hugh?
Yes, I believe so. And I'm trying to remember. Might have been possibly his sister. Might have been his sister.
Think, but
I would have
more
to.
Than I.
Yeah, I haven't looked into that for a while, but she was here probably. Well, I don't know what year Hugh graduated, but it was probably in the 20s, late 20s. So I think it may be. I'd have to confirm that, but I believe they might have been brother and sister.
Okay, awesome. And then we've got one more question in the chat right now. Can the public view the items in the archives by making special arrangements? And if so, how?
Absolutely. If you just fire me an email or give us a call, just call the library. One way or the other, they'll put you in touch with me and we'll set up a time. Yep. That's what we want.
Perfect. Thank you. There's one more question that just popped up from Cynthia Hart. Where do I find the opportunity to join the crowd sourcing effort to transcribe cursive writing?
Oh, I think if you go to loc.gov, Library of Congress website, you'll find, I think, a prominent link on there somewhere for crowdsourcing. I get emails from the Library of Congress, and they're constantly inviting people to do that. So I'm pretty sure if you go to their main website, loc.gov, you'll see a link for that.
Perfect. Thank you. I'll let you know if any more come up in the chat. And as a reminder to our attendees, you're more than welcome to put your questions in the chat, but we'll also open up the cameras at the end of the event so that you can ask them your questions live as well.
Great. Great. Okay.
Now for something completely different.
Right. This is one of our heavier items, and it's as you might guess, a steam whistle. I believe it's brass, probably.
So that would have been on the end of a steam pipe.
Yes, yes.
I think.
And it had great significance at Monmouth College because it was attached to our old heating plant, and it was used almost like you would use telegraph or smoke signals or whatever. It would not only go off to announce the time of a class beginning, but it would be used on the weekends to announce a victory in football, and it would toot out the score. And it would also be when we would have our color rush, which is the pole scrap, they would blow that in the morning to announce that it was happening that day, and townspeople would know to come and watch events like that. So, of course, in the old days, well, we still have our buildings heated by steam, a lot of them. In the old days, it was fired by coal, and now it's natural gas. But we had the big steam boilers, and so there was plenty of steam for these for this object to operate. And I think the original one may have come from a Mississippi steamboat. There was stories about that. It was later replaced, and I think this one may have come from an old like thresher, a steam tractor. We don't have the exact, I don't think we have the exact source of it, other than we were told on good authority that it was the college whistle. It's been many years ago that we got it, so I'd have to look into those. Yeah. Right. But it's a neat thing. We've written about it over the years, and I think a lot of people, probably more from the 1950s, early 60s, will remember hearing the whistle. I think it was probably removed maybe around 1960, although somebody might know more specifically what year the whistle ended.
And it came down when the tower came down, right?
Well, some of you may remember it was in the fall of 1963. There was a huge brick chimney on the heating plant when it was coal operated, that they toppled during the school year. We have photographs of it. They didn't.
Brick.
Right, we have brick. They didn't need it anymore because they were converting to natural gas, and so it was toppled. It may have been around that time that the steam whistle was retired as well.
It's relatively easy to take care of.
Right.
Metals are, they have their own problems, mainly rusting and those types of things. But mainly, this is just so big and cumbersome and heavy that it could do damage to something else. So I try to make sure I keep it in a box that fits it, and I keep it kind of wrapped up so it doesn't do a lot of rolling around. And I keep it down on a shelf with all the other big, heavy lug things.
Yeah, we have, for example, the clapper from the original college bell, which weighs quite a bit, and we have an elevating screw from the college cannon, which was later duplicated, so we don't use the actual original one of that. But speaking of metal and its issues, we didn't get one out today, but many times when they did a cornerstone on a college building, they created a little time capsule box, and often they created it out of metal. It was, soldered. It might have been copper, it might have been tin, whatever. But in most cases, that was a really bad idea because those cornerstones did not survive, or the time capsules did not survive. They got full of water, they corroded, they were just a mess. And so when we did the cornerstone for the Center for Science and Business in 2013, I was kind of tasked with collecting the information or the materials for it. And I wanted to make sure that they survived. So I ended up getting a large ammunition box, a metal box that closed securely, but within it, I put several layers of those plastic bags you can get to preserve clothing that have a vacuum seal. And then you suck the air out with a vacuum. So there are probably 4 or 5 layers of that surrounding the materials, and then they're inside this cartridge box. So whenever that's opened 100 years from now or whatever, I trust everything inside is going to be intact.
I do too.
We won't be here to see it, but we'll hope they are.
We recently, our First Methodist Church downtown recently, they're building a new building, and they found their cornerstone time capsule. Totally same situation. And as they're now building a new building, they're working on what are they going to put in their new time capsule. And I know it sounds odd, but they're actually going to use a vault for an urn. So because, it's going to be in the interior of the building. So I think they're kind of it's all going to be great. They've really thought about it, and it's going to be over secure, I'm sure. So, but yeah, definitely. Those are some of the questions we get a lot.
And here we have, this is one of my favorite things is photography and photographs. And we, in the early days, as you may know, photographs were done on glass plates. And yeah, okay, I can pick it up.
Yep.
Anyway, a lot of times they would be put on, there would be a collodion process where the glass would be coated with a chemical and then exposed with salts and that sort of thing. And there were these large format cameras, which did incredibly sharp images.
They're beautiful.
And some of the plates are very large. This is a fairly large one. Some are even larger. This happens to show the burning of Old Main in November of 1907. And with digital technology now, you can scan these and get a very high resolution image. And you can see, you can't see it here very well, but out on the lawn, the students had managed to save a lot of the equipment from inside the building. They went in there, it would never be allowed today while the fire was going on, pulled out desks and scientific equipment and books and all kinds of stuff. And you can actually, on a digital scan, you can see all these items just really up close. So these are a real treasure. And, you know, in many ways, they're better than the Kodak negatives of the early 20th century because they were on celluloid or whatever, which isn't as stable. And they really didn't have the quality of lens for a lot of those early cameras. The Brownies and some of those type of cameras didn't have the quality of lens that the early box cameras did, the wooden cameras. So we really like these, and we try to preserve them, but we also hope, you know, one day to get them all scanned and online and people can use them.
Absolutely.
The thing about them is originally they were made when they made it a print, it was a contact print, and they just basically put that glass negative right onto the photographic paper and exposed it. So it wasn't enlarged. They didn't use an enlarger. They used actual size. And we also have some early prints from some early photographers that are very well done prints that are still look great. And, you know, and then we have more recent photos, you know, from the 30s and 40s and that sort of thing. We recently got a collection from a former college photographer, and on each of the negative envelopes, he has written in instructions on how he printed that negative. And he'll talk about, I put a piece of Kleenex under this end, and here was the f-stop. I used this time exposure. And so even in the more modern times, they really used a lot of art. There was art and stuff to the photography. It wasn't just, you know, cut and dried, you know, print it and
a creative process,
right,
for sure.
Absolutely. But we have, you know, photographs in so many different formats over the years. And, you know, sadly, probably about the 1990s, everything started going to, you know, color prints, and you'd go out to Photomat or whatever and get them printed, and they really weren't very high quality photographs. So really, you know, that era in the 60s, we had a lot of student photographers who did really beautiful work in black and white and did their own printing. And so that kind of went away for many years. And when digital cameras came in about 2000, that started to reverse itself. And so now we have lots, and I mean more, and as you know, I mean, you have more digital images than you could ever possibly need, but they are high quality, they do last, and you can do all kinds of things with them.
Right. Yeah, you can manipulate them.
So it's interesting to see the evolution and the de-evolution for a while of photography, because we have big chunks of time when we don't have good photographs of college events and that sort of thing.
This is always a fun one. In my class that Jordan mentioned, I teach for the history department. We spend a whole class on photography and kind of the history of photography and knowing photography as a document or a process of documentation. So it's a lot of fun because most of our students don't really even know how, like a photographic print, that there's a whole chemical process or a whole process period behind that, right? They're so used to, just snapping a selfie on their phone. So it's a really good learning experience to learn about documentation and what it means to a culture and a society. Preservation wise, yeah, photography is a huge challenge because there's so many different processes over the last almost 200 years now of photography. This actual printed plate itself, and plates have their own challenges, as you might be able to tell. This one has a corner out of it, so this is almost like a plate glass window. It's very fragile, and also when it does break, it's very dangerous. So this is just in a Mylar sleeve, open, because we do want air to get in there so that we don't get humidity inside here that would start working on the emulsions on the plate, because mold could grow and then it just totally destroys your image. So we have it in there, and of course we've got our gloves on, but which we always do with photography. And then I've put it in just kind of this folded up little envelope box called a phase box. And I just made it because then it is in a actual box with some other glass plates as well. And I know it seems a little crazy, but the best way to store a plate is always straight up and down, to never lay them flat because they can get banged and then break a lot easier. So we're giving them some cushion. We're giving them a little bit of room in there so the air can get in it. And of course, just simple things, just marking this end up, fragile, handle with care, be careful. The little red light that warns you what you're about to pick up is very fragile. So sometimes those simple little things. This particular plate itself, the plates that we have of the fire, are very interesting to our students too. And I actually use it to document one of our disasters, because one of the things we talk about in our class is how do you plan for a disaster and how do you recover from it? And this is a wonderful shot to use because there are townspeople out on the lawn. There's this rickety old ladder that the firemen are using, all these terrible things. In fact, on the lawn, like Jeff said, the students went in and got some of the books and the materials from the building out. And I would almost be willing to bet that the books that are sitting on these tables out here on the lawn, we have some downstairs in our government document collection. They've got charred edges on them, but we've been able to preserve them for another 150 years. So neat stuff. What's next?
Shall we go with this big thing?
Oh my, yeah.
Okay, we're gonna swing this around and
Hopefully.
talk about technology changing. There we go. This is a Litho Stone for creating a diploma, one of Monmouth College's early diplomas. And as you may know how lithography works, it's like oil and water don't mix, and it's very closely engraved text and graphics, whatever, extremely fine work. And each piece would be, each diploma would be done individually and pulled off. And of course, in those days, it was sheepskin, it was parchment. And this is an example of what an early diploma would have looked like. And this one it's probably from the same company because it's very similar. From what I have read, the company that did these diplomas, the factory burned, and somehow they were able to retrieve some of the original stones and get them back to some of the institutions that had lost them, because it was a real tragedy when all of a sudden these stones they'd used for years were unavailable because they took a lot of work to make. And what's interesting on the back of this one, they have two sides, obviously, And Muskingum College's diploma is on the back of our stone here. So it's just really interesting to see how this process was done. But it was just beautiful. I mean, if you look at the detail on the diplomas, the craftsmanship of the engravers is just beyond belief. And to do it in stone, they couldn't make mistakes. It was there was no way to rub out a mistake on a litho stone. But the thing weighs, I don't know.
Oh, it's very heavy.
Probably,
Jeff had to help me bring it in here.
Yeah, probably 100 pounds or so, I'm guessing. And it's about 2.5 inches thick, maybe. So, yeah, pretty neat thing to have in the archives. But as needless to say, our diplomas today are produced in a more modern way. They're not quite as fancy as the old ones. I'll get the camera back around. Okay. And
how about the piano?
okay, yeah, we're going to go back to some photography here.
We have another question in the chat. You mentioned wearing gloves while handling the archives. What about being masked while dealing with the artifacts to minimize humidity from breath?
I've never run across that. I think everything's just so open, and we monitor the humidity. Well, actually, I'm sitting about 3 foot from a temperature humidity gauge. We monitor the humidity in our different rooms, especially in our special collections here and in the archives next door. And again, we're monitoring. The system that we have here, we can cool. We can't do a whole lot with the humidity other than keeping things cool. So yeah, I've never really run across that, especially with paper, those types of things, because it does take a little bit of time for them to absorb. We just really try to keep things as stable as possible. Humidity in and of itself isn't necessarily bad. For some things it could be good. It's the really quick and constant change back and forth that humidity is the danger of humidity and damage to things. And again, it depends upon what you have, right? Paper, photography is handled differently. Speaking of, this is, and stop me, Jeff, when you, this is called a panoramic photograph. I'm sure you've seen them. You can take them with your phone. And they were kind of quite the thing in the late 1800s, right around the turn of 1900 and so forth. And this is what happens to a panoramic photograph with humidity. They just start curling. You've got all of the emulsions and the chemicals on the one side, and it starts to shrink or dry up. And then it grabs that paper and it just starts rolling. So we do have quite a collection of them. I have a few that are still in this condition, but most of them I have been able to humidify. I'm going to dive it right side up. And I can't really just take this and unroll it. I have to kind of slowly kind of unscroll it, right? Like you would read a scroll. And if you can see, that's a class photo. I think, I can't remember when this one's from. But unless I can humidify this and put it in a...
Okay, this is 1924.
1924, in fact.
In front of...
I think it's that McMichael.
Yeah.
Standing right out there in front.
Michael, yeah.
So...
And...
but I would have to humidify it, put it in a humidification chamber, which I build in a kind of like a Rubbermaid tub with a little bit of water in the bottom of it. And you leave it in there until you'll open up the tub and the paper has relaxed. And then I can do some things with flattening. And sometimes you can kind of wet the back too and kind of get them back in there into a flatter shape. And then once they're flattened, I am putting them in a Mylar sleeve, encapsulating them in Mylar, and that helps keep them flatter. So this is from
1957.
Yeah. So even in 50 years later, or I guess in this case 30 years later, it was still a thing to have your class photograph taken in that way. But then I'm keeping them flat. We have special boxes to put them in to kind of help keep them weighted down. Some really neat ones from around World War One. Some of the troops out on the front lawn.
Yeah. Student Army Training Corps that didn't ever get into World War One, but they trained on campus. But the interesting thing about them, and there's several interesting things, but the camera that created them was actually on a rotating tripod, and it would scan basically the crowd. And the famous thing a lot of people remember is somebody at one end would run around after they'd been photographed and get photographed on the other end, so they'd be in the same image twice. We see a few of those.
This is another copy of that 1924, and you can see what's happened to it. It's totally, the emulsions have cracked. In fact, the whole end of the photograph is cracked off, and I have it downstairs. But sometimes these types of things that I have multiple copies of and already have damage to them, they're great to train the students with. So.
Yeah. And it's interesting because the faculty would all be in the front row, prominent, and then all the students would be behind them. Today, trying to get all the faculty together in one shot, or the students, probably even more so, to get the students together would be a near impossibility. But you know, in those days, photographs were a novel thing, and they were an important record of the school year. So everybody turned out for them. But people are a little busier these days.
Think about the last thing we have for you today is actually something that Jeff just brought into my office a couple weeks ago, and this is often how things come to me in cardboard box. This is good. Actually, I've had things come in a lot worse shape, but these are a collection of correspondence letters from President Heywood.
Right, and we were contacted recently by a professor emeritus at Kenyon College, and some of you may remember that President Heywood came here from Kenyon in 1980 when he became president and served until 1994. This was a longtime friend named Charles Rice, who was, I believe, in the psychology department, and they corresponded regularly for years. And Bruce Heywood was a man of letters, and he wrote long letters. Personal stuff, but also kind of chronicling what was going on at the college at that time. And it's really a remarkable archive. It's all, I believe, cataloged by date, by year currently. But we'll have probably a lot to go through to kind of get it in a format that will be usable. But it's a remarkable thing, and probably we don't have anything really comparable to it in our archives.
I don't think so.
We have, letters, personal letters are kind of few and far between. We have, especially from presidents. But, this is unique because this was from somebody off campus who wasn't really directly related to Monmouth College, but very directly related to our president. And so I think for future researchers, this will be a really neat thing. We had another collection come in a couple of years ago from the Gamer family, and Professor Carl Gamer was here for many years, and he was an inveterate letter writer and writer in general, and collected everything. And he was very involved in the civil rights movement in Monmouth in the 1950s and 60s. And it's just a treasure trove of correspondence and documents. He corresponded with senators and congressmen and all kinds of people. And so, that for a future researcher, that's going to be quite an interesting archive to have. It's a challenge. I'm glad I don't have to spend the time doing it, but I think that's something that students can get involved in
Definitely.
and do some of that, laborious work. But it's very important, and we hope that one day, digitization can make it accessible, these types of things accessible to people out there. I mean, as college historian, I constantly get emails and phone calls, people wanting to know about their grandparents and whatever. And, I try to look it up. it would be so much better if they had access to all of our records and be able to do their own searches, because these genealogists are, they're very good at it, and it would just make it so much, we can only spend so much time, you know, devoting to that. So one day, you know, in an ideal world, the whole world will be digitized as far as historical records.
We have done a bit of that. We belong to the Library Consortium in the state of Illinois that's been able to help us purchase software, and so to help kind of to circumvent the cost of that. And then, of course, these are what our students, our archive students work on. These are the projects that they work on. We've done several scrapbooks. We've done an awful lot of the Naval Flight School collection, the newsletter that they published while they were here in the 40s. That's all been scanned and digitized. So we've had to take a little hiatus from our normal operations for the last year and a half, but we're hoping to get into some more things in the next year or so. I hope. So.
Right, and also mention that we've had some students go on to do archival work.
Absolutely.
And done very well with it, and I think they got a good training here. I mean, they got hands-on experience, and they got excited about it, and they're doing it now as professionals.
And give them that the seed, the spark, and just, you know, like, maybe that's something I would like to do. So that's always fun to see that happen.
Right.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. At this time, what I'm going to do is enable it so that all of our attendees can turn on their cameras, turn on their sound. So if they'd like to ask you questions or interact, they're able to. It looks like we've gotten through all of our questions in the chat. So I'll keep my eye on that. If you are not comfortable asking a question or turning your video on, you're more than welcome to still put that in the chat, and I'll continue to monitor it throughout the rest of this afternoon's program. So just one moment. All right. I've got to go through and invite everybody one by one, so it takes a moment.
A lot of familiar faces.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's Mr. Gamer.
All right, I think I've invited everyone. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free. The time is now. The floor is yours.
Has that photo of the fire ever been used in the alumni magazine? I'm trying to remember seeing it, and I don't think I ever can recall it. It didn't stick if I did.
Right. I think, you know, years ago, I recall seeing some photos of the fire, but I don't know that probably some of these glass plate ones, I don't believe we have now. We may have done something when we were talking about, you know, we recently constructed a scale model of Old Main, and I think we might have included one of those photos in the story about that. But it's something we could consider doing, you know, as like a full page photo so people can really see the detail on it. I think, you know, that's a good idea.
I will say that the photograph collection is big time next on my list of things to get my hands on. I just need to get some students to help out. We actually were able to work on part of it, some pre-sorting and so forth this past semester. So I got 2 really great archive students right now. So.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Is anything in your archives that has to deal with Calvin, Bryce, Hoover?
Ooh. Sounds familiar. Can you talk a little bit about him?
Yes, he was one of your perhaps one of Monmouth's most, I want to say illustrious, but outstanding graduates. I think he graduated about 1925, but he was instrumental in establishing the field of comparative economic systems. He was also instrumental in the Marshall Plan after World War II. He had done a great deal of writing with regards to the Soviet Union and also Germany under Hitler. And he was awarded the Medal of Honor by President Harry Truman. But he has a very outstanding and long career. He was credited during World War II. He was the head of a anti-Nazi group in Sweden, which was able to locate the manufacturing facilities for the Nazis producing artificial oil. And they were, because of that, the Allies were able to bomb and destroy those plants, which resulted in the Luftwaffe not having fuel to get their planes in the air. And it was credited for making the D-Day invasion in Normandy possible by keeping the Nazi air force out of the conflict. But anyway, it sort of got me that there seems to be no acknowledgement of his having gone and graduated from Monmouth. I looked it up on WikiLeaks. Well, actually, it was, I think, a site from Duke University, where he had been the chair of the economics department for a number of years. And also headed up the Duke Graduate School in economics for quite a few years. But anyway, it just sort of, to me, seems like Monmouth would have paid more attention to him and have had something to acknowledge the fact that he was a Monmouth grad.
Yeah, I see that we have him listed on our Wikipedia page, class of 22, founder of the field of comparative economic systems, noted economist, professor at Duke, wrote The Economic Life of Soviet Russia in 1931. But I don't think we've really profiled him, so that might be a good story for the magazine. I'll certainly look into that. And I don't know if we would have any of his papers or not. I'm not.
It's not ringing any bells. Yeah. Something, when you mentioned the Marshall Plan, something kind of flickered, but yeah, we'd have to take.
Yeah, that's I remember the name and that sort of thing, but I had never really studied him, so I think I will.
Yeah.
Fantastic. What other questions do you guys have for Jeff and Lynn?
I have kind of a general question. What are the criteria for something making it into the archives? How old does something have to be?
Technically, age isn't really a consideration. It's really more, how does it connect to the college? What is the connection, and how close is the connection? And maybe when did the person or the, I guess in that respect, so it has to do with anything that's published by the college first and foremost. And then if there's a college connection to an individual or so forth, is what would end up in there. So we have a few little bits and pieces of things that I've kind of gathered together as just calling a general historic collection now. So they weren't produced, these items weren't produced by the college, but they were produced by individuals that may have had a connection to the college. So I don't really deal in any kind of local history, that's more in the realm of our local historical society, museum, and our public library. So it's really more focused on what is the college producing. Does that help make sense?
Thank you.
I got a quick question. As you digitize your archives, are they going to be made available for research online?
Yes, we do have the ones, the certain things that we've done so far. And there's different considerations when you're deciding what you're going to digitize. Preservation is a big issue. If something can be, something is, somebody, you know, people really want to use it, but it's in bad shape. So in order to let people use it, we go ahead and digitize it. And that was where we began when we did several of our old scrapbooks. Again, because they're so fragile, we just got them digitized, and they are up yeah, in a collection. And I can say Google that, but you can come to the library's homepage, and there's a section there on the archives, and all of our digital collections are there. Sometimes it gets done in different, by different software, depending upon what the project and so forth, and the funding for the project. We were able to do all of the college newspapers about 10 years ago. So from 1853 or so, all the way up to 2010, we have scanned and digitized those. And they are available. We had sent those off to a company to have that done, and then they produced kind of an online index and database for us on that. And then we actually have some things up on the Internet Archive. So all of the college yearbooks, the Ravelings, from about 1894 when it began till its end in, I believe, 2002 or 2003, about there. Yeah. They are in the Internet Archive, and all of the college catalogs, which when it was first published, I believe in the late 1850s, 1860s, it was kind of a precursor to the yearbook, to the Ravelings. So sometimes it helps answer those Ravelings questions early on. But that's up on the Internet Archive as well. So, you know, I think we got into it when it was so they're not all in one place, but what we try to do in our web page is bring them to the links in one place where you can link out to them that way. And if you ever have any question with it, just give me a call, or give the library a call, and we'll get you to them for sure. And those are the things that we really want to start getting into more and more. So scrapbooks, the Naval Flight School is up. There's a few photographs, all of the newspapers, all of the catalogs, and all of the Ravelings.
Raises another question. What happened to the Ravelings? Why did it stop?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's kind of a nationwide trend. A lot of colleges quit doing them. Waning interest by students, part of it, and financial concerns. But I will say our vice president for marketing is very interested in trying to bring it back. We feel that there are students out there who do high school yearbooks, and they're very interested in it, and they would do it. You kind of need to have an advisor to help them along, but I personally find it a very tragic thing that, because we've lost a lot of the history of the past 20 some years because it was not collected in any consistent way like yearbooks would do, and clubs and organizations and all that, and even just photos of the students while they were students. So when you come back 50 years from now, you can't have a name tag with your college photo on it because they were not saved. So anyway, we're looking at ways. I mean, technology keeps changing. Daily newspapers are going under. Maybe digital is going to replace college yearbooks. But we haven't completely dismissed it. There's hope that we'll be able to bring it back.
Kind of a retro thing.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
This is Marcia. I invite you to go back in your archives and look at the 1969 yearbook. I was privileged to be editor of that, but my point is the first, I think, half a dozen pages of it came from your archives. They're older pictures. I remember spending long
I don't know if you
hours.
see behind me, we have this beautiful display case in the back of the room, and the 69 yearbook is on display.
Truly, I'm honored.
Fabulous cover.
I'm
Yeah,
really
so
honored.
that would be up on Internet Archive. Mhm.
Alice, did you have a question?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever really heard the phrase archive student. I don't think it was like, I don't think there was any class in that kind of thing. How did that come about I didn't take any history classes at Monmouth, so maybe that's how I missed it, but is it a new thing?
I think it actually kind of got its start in the 1990s. Stacy Cartery was a professor in our history department. She's a fairly noted historian who's now at Iowa State. She served as one of our first archivists, full-time. She wasn't full-time because she taught, but she was one of the first that we ever had who focused on archives, and she got a lot of it organized, and she, I think, was the first to really use students in her classes and who were interested in archival sciences and that sort of thing. And so I think that's when it kind of really got started. And Lynn's kind of resurrected that a bit. I think there was a short time when we were kind of without an archivist again.
Yeah, it was always something that, Stacy and I always kicked around. I think, after a while, she kind of wanted, she was more on the academic side of it and really bringing kids into it and creating the course. And a lot of what an archivist does, and this is what we teach the students, is it's very similar to library operations and museum operations, but with a slight perspective shift. One of the things that I really wanted to do was get that collection described and get it in a place where you could search it. It was in a Word document, and I ended up cataloging it, and it is now in our catalog with all of our book collections and so forth. So if you search Naval Flight School, up pops the record, and you get all of the description and so forth on it. And so then when I took it over, I think I did that right away, and then I kind of slowly started getting into teaching it as a course. So it's we actually have a public history track in the history department. So it's one of the courses in the public history track. So there's a basic course where we're kind of learning all about what an archivist does and what archives mean and so forth. And then there's that's kind of the pre-req basic course, and then the next course up from that is a practicum where they actually get to they have to put in 6 hours a week, and they're working on a project. And these are the archive students that are helping me out a lot. We had 2 this past semester. One worked on a project to kind of clean up. We have a lot of old photographed albums from the late 1800s. And she did a lot of cleaning up on that and doing research at the same time. So they're learning preservation. They're learning how to do research. She made a display, an exhibit on it. Another student did a lot of, we had some newer collections that had come in the past couple of years. So she was working on arranging and organizing those collections. So she was doing more of the processing end of she was the one who was sorting these photographs. We were kind of doing a pre-sort of the photographs. So, and both of those students are, one will graduate in December, and she's definitely going into archives. She also has some art classes, so she has kind of that angle. And then the other student is a history major, and she wants to be a librarian. So the archives class kind of helps out with that as well too. She will be taking our library science class, hopefully next spring. But it all kind of molds together, and it's a good perspective for them to see. And the neatest part of it is they can actually get their hands on some things. So
And a related thing that.
Is there anything,
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to ask if there's anything I should be looking for when I'm finally cleaning out my mother's basement that might be on your bucket list.
Well, absolutely. You know, obviously anything that's more personal, like scrapbooks and things like that. We do have, you know, probably all the yearbooks we need, all of the,
Yeah.
you know, I don't
Oh,
know.
you're not getting my yearbooks,
Yeah,
no.
but red books and things like that. We have, you know, pretty well filled out alumni magazines. But anything that was personal to a student or unique, boy, those are the types of things.
especially during their student years and yeah.
Photographs, that sort of thing.
The,
Yeah.
the yearbook thing is hard. It's hard for me to say, no, I don't need them.
Yeah.
But we have at least, I think the lowest amount of copies is 5 of something. And we have most things we have at least 20 copies of. We have microfilmed them. We have digitized them. We have a lot in Jeff's office.
Yeah.
We have some down at our County Historical Society off-site and so forth. So we have plenty. You know, unless it was her yearbook and she put a lot of stuff into it, you know, I don't know, when I was in high school, you used to pass your yearbook around, everybody signed it, you know. So if there was if it's a yearbook, you know, and it comes as her collection, I would keep it in a collection of her.
Oh, it's actually mine. It's mine. It's just still in the
separating it.
museum of my mother's basement, the museum of Alice.
But yeah, I have people write all the time. Oh, I found grandma's yearbooks from 1922. Would you like them? And I'm like, thanks for thinking of us, but.
And I just wanted to mention too, as far as students, a related thing, Professor Bill Urban, who's retired now, had a historiography class for years, and he would assign his students to do biographies of Monmouth College faculty, and they also did a project of Monmouth mayors. And so a lot of the collection in the archives
Gets used.
Yeah, it is these student written biographies, and a lot of them, I mean, they're annotated papers. They're fairly well researched, so they're very good to have. And these were generated by students. And the mayor's thing is there's actually an online website that I go to occasionally that chronicles all of the city's mayors. So, you know, those types of things, you know, I think are another way. It's not preserving necessarily, but it's preserving our history.
Exactly.
How about scrapbooks? Do you have any interest in them?
Yeah, we're very interested in scrapbooks.
Yeah, a student scrapbook or And we've had those get used a lot. We've had several courses in the past on, we have a history of education class, and they do some projects where we're bringing things out. So kind of like the history of being a student. They get used for all those types of things.
Awesome. Well, I hate to interject, but we will need to start to wrap up here. Just a few announcements, and I'll do this one first. I actually put the link to the Ravelings in the chat, so if you want to grab that, you're more than welcome to. We also have it linked on the Golden Scots page on the Monmouth College website. If you go to on-demand activities, just click on Ravelings and it'll take you there as well. We have another event starting in 45 minutes at 6 p.m. It's titled 17 Men at the Center Seat, Their Courts and Their Times with Dan Cotter, class of 88. And then you can actually come back tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. and see Jeff again for a 76th reunion of World War II, Fighting Scots in World War II. So he'll do a presentation on that tomorrow morning. A full list of the rest of the weekend's events are also located on the Monmouth College website. You'll just click on that Golden Scots tab once you hit the alumni page. Thank you so much to Lynn and Jeff for putting together this presentation, and thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon. We look forward to seeing you later on this weekend. Go Scots!
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
See ya.